Good morning, seniors. I hope you all are doing well. We have a very brief lesson today on understanding how interest works. It is your last full week of class in high school. Isn't that exciting? All right, let's look at a little bit about how interest works and we'll move on from there, okay? I forgot to set my timer up, so we're going to have to wing it and hope we get it done in less than 15 minutes. I don't think we'll have a problem. All right, first reminder, Matthew 25, the parable of the unfaithful steward. I hope you remember this parable where a man is going on a journey far away and he gives to several different servants different amounts of money. He gives one 10 talents, one 5 talents, and one talent. And the one who received the one was so afraid of what his master would do if he lost it that he buried it. And he doesn't gain any interest on that money. And when the master returns, he condemns him and says that he's an unfaithful steward because he didn't give the money out to usury or interest. He didn't get any interest on it. So the master didn't earn any money. The Lord wants us to use our money wisely and to the best of our ability. So we're going to look at some ways that we can do that today. So how does a deposit grow? We can put money in the savings account all day long, but how does it really grow? Well, there are three factors that influence that growth, and they are the nominal rate of interest, and we're going to define why I put that nominal word on the front of it in just a minute. Nominal rate of interest, the frequency of compounding, and the length of time the funds remain in the account. Okay, so we're going to look at that we're going to look at each one of these in turn. Remember back to basic math, I think like fourth or fifth grade somewhere, you started defining interest is equal to principal times rate times time. PRT, I equals PRT was the formula we used. Interest equals principal times rate times time. If you multiply those three things together, you get how much interest you can earn on money. And then I'm supposing you guys did this in Algebra 1 somewhere. Some of you might remember it, where you studied the formula for compounding interest. And your book goes into that on page 254. We're not going to bother going into it. You can look at it again if you want to, but you should have had some experience with it either in Algebra 1, possibly Algebra 2. Okay, so compound interest is different than nominal interest rate. Okay, nominal interest rate is this account earns X percent of interest. We'll get to that in a minute. Compound interest is the calculation of interest on reinvested interest along with the original principal. For example, if I earned 5% interest on an account and I had $100 in there, at the end of the year, compound interest means that they put that $5 in that I earned in interest. I'd have $105, and the next year I would get interest on 105, not on the original 100, but on 105. Okay? And then compounding that every year means every year I'm getting more and more interest. Okay, so let's talk first about the nominal interest rate. Those are the first of the three things that determine how fast my money grows. The nominal interest rate is the interest rate a financial institution will pay for your deposit expressed in annual terms. Most banks today pay very low interest rates, like 1 or 2% on deposits if you're lucky, okay? So let's say that you have a 2% interest rate on a deposit of $1,000. That means at the end of the year, you're going to have $1,020, I think, if I'm doing my math right. 1,000 times 0.02. Yeah, $20, okay? So at the end of the year, you should have $20. Now, that's the nominal interest rate. That depends on the size of the deposit and the length of time that you've committed your funds. If you go into a standard bank and say you just want to open a savings account, you're going to get the lowest possible rate they can give you. If you go into a bank and you say, I'm willing to leave these funds here and not touch them for 10 years, you'll get a better rate. And the more money you have, you'll get a better rate. Okay. So, just like in borrowing, the longer you're going to borrow, the higher your interest rate. The longer you're going to save, the higher your interest rate. Okay. All right. The next one is the frequency of compounding. This gives us an effective interest rate. An effective interest rate is the true rate of interest on an account when you consider the frequency of compounding. Let's go back to that same illustration we just had that was so easy. You got 2% interest on your account. You put in $1,000. At the end of the year, you'll have $20 more. But if they compound it twice a year, just twice a year, okay? That means at the 6-month mark, they're going to put in half of that interest. So instead of getting $20 in December, you're going to get $10 in January. Okay, so that means you now have $1,010 in your account in June, excuse me. Okay, $1,010 in June. That means when they go to add the interest in December, they're not going to give you interest on $1,000. They're going to give you interest on $1,010. Okay, so you'll get a little bit more. Granted, it won't be much, but it starts slow and then over time it builds. So simple interest is calculated one time a year, where effective interest rate is what you end up getting at the end of the year because they compounded it more frequently than once a year. Compounding, as you see on my last point here, can be done annually, semi-annually, quarterly, monthly, weekly, even daily. If they could daily compound my interest, wow, I could really make some headway on savings. Those are rare accounts and they're harder to find. There are two things to consider though when you consider where do I put my money that I'll get the best possible interest rate. First of all is that banks do not necessarily compound your interest and post it to the account at the same time. Your book gives an example of somebody who has maybe a monthly compound. I don't remember all the details. A monthly compound, but they withdraw their money the day before that interest is actually added, so they get nothing. Okay, those are the kind of things that banks will try to get away with, and they can because it's the legal way to do it. But because they can get away with it, we as consumers have to be wise and look at those details and make sure that we understand them before we leave our money with people who are going to do that. Okay. The second thing we need to consider are escheat laws. And these are laws that are on every state's books where if an account sits idle for too long, meaning I've done nothing to it, I'm just leaving my money alone. If I do that, sometimes it's 5 years, sometimes it's 10 years. If I do that and I don't touch my money at all in that account for that period of time, those funds are actually turned over to the state and the state keeps them. Now, normally the state publishes a list in the newspaper, but not too many of us look in newspapers anymore. So, but there are places you can go, like, I think it's like missingmoney.com or something like that. I'm sure you could Google it. And you can find money that maybe, this might happen. Parents open a savings account for a newborn and they put it away and they forget about it. And then years later, the money's gone because it got turned over to the state. My aunt actually had this, and we found it after her death, where she had lived in Pennsylvania for a number of years and forgot she had an account up there. So my dad was able to get that as her executor and have that turned back over. The state is required to turn it back over to you. It's not lost for good, but you're going to stop gaining your interest rate at that point. So how do you get around these? Well, you have to know what your state laws are. And then maybe, if the law is every 5 years, then you're either putting money in there, more money every month so that you avoid that escheat law clause, or you're taking just a little bit out and maybe even putting it right back in, something like that, so that there's some activity on that account instead of just leaving it and forgetting about it. Okay, so the third thing that determines how much interest I earn is the duration of the deposit. Ultimately, leaving your money in the account is what is going to make it grow. So make a goal and stick with it. Then we need to learn about the rule of 72. This was brand new to me. I'd never heard of this before, but this is a great tool that you can use. The number of years times the interest rate that you're earning equals 72. This formula can be used to determine how long it's going to take you to double your money. For example, if I'm getting 2% interest, then I put a 2 in for that interest rate. The number of years times 2 equals 72, and I solve it. That would be 36. At 2% interest, it's going to take me 36 years to double my money. Okay, here's my example. And if I had a 5% interest rate, it would take me 14.4 years to double my deposit. So just some things to think about as you are getting ready to hopefully start saving some money. And I know you're going to be starting to spend a lot of money because of college and all of that. I'm going to try to rush through a couple of assignments, a couple of sections this week, and then we will, at the end of the week, review for our exam. Remember, it will only be over the personal finance portion of our of what we've done this semester. Okay. All right. Have a good day.